Good day. My name is Amir Piric. I'm a Chief Program Coordinator at UIL, at the Institute. So I have few minutes allocated to introduce to you our medium-term strategy and some of the key elements. So I would appreciate very much if my slides could be shared. So Sama, could you please go to the next page, please? Okay, so just to give you a bit of a background, during the last year, we had this task of developing new medium-term strategy for UIL, which is going to cover the period between now and 2029. We tried all the possible avenues to build consensus, understanding, and consultation with colleagues. So what you see on the screen are basically what we came up with, and in perfect consistency with UNESCO education sector goals. What are the key vision and mission statements for the Institute? In terms how we will achieve this, we will have a set of strategic objectives, which will focus on support for design implementation of lifelong learning policies, and obviously to advance participation in the lifelong learning and to gain a greater equity and inclusion in learning. Now, Sama, can I go to the next slide, please? Now, in terms of the operational modalities, what we are going to do, we will continue building institutional capacities at the national and local level. We will continue providing more reliable and better data and knowledge on lifelong learning. And obviously, we will do our best to strengthen our partnerships for advocacy and different other purposes. In terms of the thematic priorities, clearly, we will try to build quality learning ecosystems, then learning, work, and life, and skills throughout life, with the ultimate goal to have no one left behind. So finally, the outcome, which is also reflected in our medium-term strategy and in UNESCO strategic documents, is to build learning ecosystem that work across life in every setting and include everyone. So I'll stop at this stage, and I know I only have like 4 minutes, 5 minutes allocated to this, so I'm on time, so in case you have any questions. And by the way, our medium-term strategy is available from our website. Well, I see no hands raised. So it's now 11:35. So according to the program, we will need to move now to panel 4 on climate change. And in my program, Mr. Simon Steele from UNFCCC should take over from here. Hello?
Thank you, Amir. I will take over as the
You're
moderator.
taking over.
But thank you very much. And,
thank you, Raul.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
So hello, everybody, and welcome to the 70th anniversary of UIL. Once again, my name is Raul Valdez, and I'm the team leader at UIL, and I will be moderating this third panel, which is called Climate Change, that together with the others to come on the rest of the day, will present the vision of relevant topics in which the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning has been working and will be highly involved, of course, in the coming years. So we know we are under increasing pressure and fundamental transformations are required, and that climate change, this climate change panel has on that sense the objective of highlighting the role of lifelong learning for climate action, will showcase good examples, and will inspire UIL's future work on this topic. We will be discussing topics related to current facts and figures on climate change, also the importance of lifelong learning for combating climate change and the role of youth and cities therein. Well, the session will start with an introduction on the topic, followed by a UIL colleague presentation on the work done and that one to be done in the coming years. And then it will continue with 2 respondents to the 2 first presentations. And at the end of the presentation, we'll have a Q&A session. Participants can post their questions in the Q&A box while speakers are presenting, and these questions will be directed to speakers after their presentations. Participants can also share good practices of lifelong learning for climate action in the chat box. Well, without further delay, I would like to invite to the floor to the introductory speaker, Mr. Carlos Álvarez Pereira, Vice President of the Club of Rome. Mr. Álvarez is a senior professional combining more than 30 years of experience in research and innovation, entrepreneurship, and business management with a passion for complexity thinking and transdisciplinary. He's keen on exploring the cultural transformation required to cross the threshold towards equitable human well-being within a healthy biosphere. So, Don Carlos, the floor is yours. I don't know if you want us to present your slides. We have them ready, or you want to do it by yourself.
Gracias, Raúl. I can share from my side. No problem at all. Let's try that. Here they are. Do you see them?
Yes, perfectly well.
Okay. So first of all, thank you to the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning for the invitation to be with you in this session on climate change. I will give you the perspective by the Club of Rome, which, as usual with the Club of Rome, will be full of, in a way, of provocations. And it's not only about climate change, you know, our perspective is global, systemic, and long-term. So we see climate change as, of course, very important and critical issue, but also as a sign of something more systemic and deeper. In a way, it's a symptom of a deeper sickness of human civilizations. And to get out of there, in our view, learning is absolutely critical. And this is why I say, well, it's more than time to learn what we already know. As I put in this title, you know, learning in the sense of changing. You know, we cannot say we have learned until the knowledge we have acquired makes us change our behaviors, our ways, our patterns, individually, but especially collectively. This year is also not only your 70th anniversary, it's the 50th anniversary of the publication of the book, which is the element that typically, if people know about the Club of Rome, they will know because of this book published 50 years ago, which was asking a question, an untypical question at the time, the question of if prosperity could lead to collapse. I usually say that when the Club of Rome, when we are good at what we do, we ask better questions. And that question was not being asked, and it was the moment to ask it and to realize that possibly, yes, prosperity, the way it was conceived at the time and the way it's still conceived today, could lead to collapse in the future. But now we are in that future, and in a way, our perception is that we could have learned from what we were saying in that book, but also from what others were saying at the time. You know, we could have prevented For instance, the situation we have in terms of climate change, in terms of pollution in general, because we were aware of a number of things, but collectively, as a human society, we decided not to learn from what we were aware of. So it was the book was a big success in terms of millions of copies sold and the controversies it created, but it failed to change the course. That was very early identified by the Club of Rome as a matter of learning. And not so many people know about this report, which in my view is at least as important as the first, as the limits to growth. No limits to learning. And of course, it connects directly with your institution and with the initiatives you are taking. And very happy to be here, making even more evident these connections. No Limits to Learning was about bridging the human gap being the difference between our capacity to act and our capacity to understand the consequences of our actions and to deal with that. And Aurelio Peccei, the founder of the Club of Rome, even invoked the necessity of a human revolution, a revolution in terms of mindsets, of mentalities, of changing our understanding of the world. This year, we have published 2 new reports to the Club of Rome, Limits and Beyond, which is very much about where are we now compared to what was described in the Limits to Growth, and Earth for All, which is more an attempt to respond to the question, what kind of policies could be useful to combine, to reconcile human well-being with the health of the biosphere. In Limits and Beyond, we make particularly an emphasis. I'm co-editor of this book, and I wrote the last chapter titled Learning What We Already Know. So we are particularly making the emphasis on learning as a way to open the space of possibilities. Again, learning in the deep sense of the term, in the sense of changing. And we dedicated the book to 2 women. Donella Meadows was the leading author of The Limits to Growth. Lynn Margulies was an eminent scientist and system thinker. Both are, if not forgotten today, they don't get the tribute they would deserve. But in general, we dedicate the book to all persons struggling to open the space of possibilities, which in a way I would say all of you present in this conference this book is also dedicated to you, because through learning, this is the way we can open the space of possibilities. In the Club of Rome, this year we started developing a specific program on learning and putting life at the center. So it includes, of course, the consideration of lifelong learning. We call it the 5th element, as a tribute to ancient traditions, saying there are 4 elements in nature, but there is something that some call spirit, prana, life, energy, or whatever. It is life itself. And actually, the idea for this program started 1 year ago, almost 2 years ago, in work developed in partnership also with UNESCO, with the Department of Education for Sustainable Development. And now we have the possibility to develop the activity, which is about convening many people to a learning alliance to make possible that human revolution of mindsets that Aurelio Peccei was invoking time ago. In the context of the work we did with UNESCO, the UNESCO Department of Education for Sustainable Development, we included, the perspective of what competences, and of course, UNESCO has done a lot of great work on this question. What competences do we need to learn? What we already know, we know in a formal manner, in a conscious way, split it into different disciplines which don't speak to each other, and split in between processes which are, far from the ground. But how do we combine that with what happening in communities in the ground? And we proposed these elements for a new competence framework, which we are using now in the development of this activity. And I'm very happy to use this context of this conference and this intervention actually as the starting point of a collaboration with the institute, the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning. All of you are more than welcome to be part of this program of activities. And I look forward to the opportunity to discuss with you, with the UIL, concrete possibilities to develop further together these ideas, and especially this idea of no limits to learning, which of course has embedded into it the perspective of lifelong learning, because as a colleague of mine says, Nora Bateson, she says that there is no difference between living and learning. Let's make it real. Thank you so much for your attention, and happy to answer any questions you could have. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your excellent explanation of the life for learning, learning for life, and these elements that you are building together with in partnership with UNESCO. And I was just following the chart that you put at the end about the meta competences, thinking about the futures and learning about learning and dance with the system. So how this intersectorality needs to be so relevant in nowadays. Thank you very much, Mr. Alvarez. We will continue with the next presenter, and we'll come with questions at the end of the session, if fine with you, because I'm sure there will be a lot of questions. There are already some for you. So I will move then, and will give the floor to my colleague, Mrs. Edith Hammer. She's a program specialist at UIL, and she will present the work of UIL on climate change, and not just what UIL has been doing, but she will share a little bit the visionary presentation of UIL's work on the topic. So, Edith, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's joining us today. Thank you also, Mr. Alvarez Pereira, for your insightful introduction to the topic. I will now continue to present UIL's ongoing and future work on climate change, which is increasingly becoming a priority of the Institute's work. Well, as we can see, people and the planet are under pressure. Rising temperatures and sea levels, climate-related poverty, unsustainable patterns of consumption and production. These are just a few of the many challenges that the global community is facing today. And addressing these challenges requires fundamental transformation, including a radical reduction of global emissions. But we can see movement. Based on the Paris Agreement and the Glasgow Climate Pact, many countries have started to develop strategies to lower their greenhouse gas emissions. And importantly, learning needs a place in this process. As stated in the Confintea 7 Marrakesh Framework for Action, adult learning and education will be key to achieve this green transformation. Within this process, we need to ensure that climate action is inclusive and that it benefits those who are already affected by climate change in their everyday lives, which are often the most vulnerable groups. So new skills are needed to develop these sustainable solutions on how we grow food, how we use land, produce and transport goods, how we power our economies. In order to achieve more sustainable economies and communities, education systems have to adapt to these new skills requirements. And targeted skills development is also key to ensure that individuals can benefit from the new opportunities, job opportunities that are arising from green economies. Here, and I'm drawing on previous statements made already today, it will be crucial to ensure that we can reach those non-engaged and non-motivated learners, and to ensure that we can be truly inclusive and holistic in terms of lifelong learning. And this will be quite crucial to make a difference at a larger scale. The climate crisis calls for a deep transformation, not only in terms of labor market skills, but also in terms of people's awareness and changing lifestyles. Learning opportunities for climate action must be provided at all levels of education. They must be provided to all age groups, in formal and non-formal environments, also including informal learning, as we have also heard today. So we need this holistic lifelong learning perspective. I would now go on to look at some strategic directions for UIL to contribute to the green transformation. First, we aim to ensure that opportunities for reskilling and upskilling for green jobs are available throughout people's lives. This will also help to compensate for the jobs that will potentially be lost in previously carbon-based economies. Also, UIL aims to support the development of national and local lifelong learning policies and strategies that consider climate change-related issues. UIL will raise awareness of the impact of climate change, enabling youth and adults to develop resilience and agency for transformation. In line with the Marrakesh framework, we will promote intergenerational approaches, empowering adults and older citizens to become role models for youth and children. And last, UIL will promote community learning and citizenship education, both of which have a long tradition at UIL, to support sustainable development and climate-friendly lifestyles in cities, but also rural areas. For UIL, climate change education will constitute a priority area of its work with member states and local governments in the next years. So looking at the national level, well, in fact, the fact that there is now an increasing commitment from countries to develop and update their so-called long-term low greenhouse gas emission development strategies provides a special momentum to promote lifelong learning for climate change. Lifelong learning will be key to provide the skills needed for the green economies and societies. And for this, it is important that national strategies for lowering carbon emissions fully integrate lifelong learning as a lever to achieve this transition. Based on its new work program on climate change, UIL will support member states to integrate lifelong learning into their strategic plans for lowering greenhouse gas emissions. This work will be based on a strong research component. It will involve an analysis of how lifelong learning is currently considered in these strategies. UIL will develop case studies on countries from different regions, countries that have already made advancements in creating holistic plans for climate action. The outcomes of this research will lead to a set of recommendations supporting countries to enhance green skills development and climate education. In addition, UIL will increasingly integrate climate change-related aspects and green skills development into its capacity building. The UIL Handbook for Lifelong Learning, which was published earlier this year, provides guidance in the development and implementation of lifelong learning policies, and it serves as a strong basis for our capacity building efforts. The development of respective learning materials for climate-related issues will importantly consider intergenerational approaches, but also online and hybrid learning formats, community-based approaches, and so forth. At the local level, we also need action. Today, cities account for 75% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. Due to the rapid pace of urbanization, cities will continue to have a major impact on the global environment. Targeted policy interventions at local level are therefore urgently needed. Cities provide a highly favorable environment to tackle climate change. Local governments do not only shape the immediate urban spaces, but they can have an impact on their wider regions. They can really make a contribution to global change. The concept of learning cities has proven as a successful approach to promote lifelong learning and sustainable development. Established 10 years ago, the UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities has made important contributions to drive climate action at local level. Today, the network counts almost 300 cities from 76 countries, and we will learn a bit more about the UNESCO GNLC later this afternoon. Building on UIL's work of the GNLC cluster on education for sustainable development, UIL will further support cities to integrate climate change learning and green skills development into their learning city strategies. Climate change is increasingly becoming a key thematic area of the GNLC, and it will also be highlighted as a topic at the next international conference on learning cities in 2024. To advance knowledge in this field, UIL will also conduct research on cities' approaches to develop green economies and societies. The research will include case studies of selected cities which show a strong commitment towards lowering their greenhouse gas emissions. The results will inform the future work of the GNLC and inspire and guide cities to follow a learning cities approach for sustainable development. But we won't go alone in this process. When developing and implementing these strategic projects, UIL will rely on a strong network of partners, including international organizations, national agencies, local governments, but also higher education institutions and our network of international researchers that we work with. Universities are key stakeholders for sustainable development, and UIL will continue its research on higher education, focusing on its role for reskilling and upskilling for the green economy. In addition to those existing partnerships, UIL is highly interested in establishing collaborations with new partners to advance this important work, including the UN Climate Change, the OECD, but also, of course, the Club of Rome, among many others. So with this, I would like to close and thank you for your attention. Very much looking to the further contributions today. Thank you.
Many thanks, Edith, for the clear and visionary presentation of UIL's work on climate change. The climate crisis calls really for a deep transformation, not only in terms of labor market skills, but also in relation to people awareness, behavior, and day-to-day decision-making in favor of sustainable development. And we heard from your presentation that adult learning and education has a role to play in active and global citizenship for the climate, enabling people to become actors in this process of sustainable development. Well, thank you very much, Edith. And I would like to continue with the respondents and would like to invite our first respondent, Mr. Ralph Behrens. He's the head of the Department of the Environmental Education in the Hamburg Ministry of Environmental and Energy. And he's the UNESCO Learning City focal point for Hamburg for the Global Network of Learning Cities. Well, dear Ralph, could you please comment what are the climate change education strategies in the UNESCO Learning City of Hamburg? How do you foresee the UIL activities in the work area, mainly considering what Mr. Alvarez was talking about, learning what we already know? So I would like to give you the floor, Ralph.
Yeah, thank you. I hope. Can you see the presentation?
We can see it, yes. You can.
Now
it's not yet.
Yeah, you can't see it, so that's better. So I love the idea of there's no limit of learning, and we are a partner city of the Global Network of Learning Cities since 2019, and we include our overall environmental, or let's say education for sustainable development strategy into the network. This is we are talking about climate change, and in Hamburg we have, of course, a climate change adaptation strategy, but it's very much focused on technical solutions: flood control, traffic infrastructure, nature protection, urban planning. I go through it very quickly. health, social things, disaster control, civil protection, research development. And then nobody was thinking about education. And we had a lot of discussions with the colleagues, and now a small part of our climate change adaptation strategy includes education. The other strategy on climate change mitigation has the same problem, let's say. They also focus on technical solutions. It's about energy efficiency, CO2 reduction. We always have the problem that we can't measure the results of CO2 reduction of our education activities. So it's about buildings, it's about mobility, it's about economy, private sector, society. And then we had the same discussion with the colleagues. Why don't you implement education into your climate change mitigation strategy? And then just to get an idea, it's a 65-page strategy, and about a quarter of one page includes education. So we had to discuss a lot, we had to fight a lot, and but it doesn't matter. We put all the education activities on the climate change, adaptation and mitigation into our overall ESD strategy. Education for Sustainable Development is the overall strategy for Hamburg. We call it Hamburg Master Plan ESD 2030. And the main goal is to implement ESD into all sectors of education, from early childhood, school education, non-formal, higher education, and adult or senior education. That's the idea of our master plan ESD, and we don't focus especially on climate change, but we put all activities of climate change into our ESD strategy. And part of our ESD strategy is our Hamburg Climate Foundation, the building and the work on climate change education with children, with adults. And we have a climate fund. So a private association, organization can apply for money to run their small climate education projects. We have climate schools. About 100 of our 450 public schools in Hamburg are climate schools with a special climate strategy. And of course, we run a lot of different climate actions in Hamburg, from early childhood in kindergartens to higher education, vocational training, and non-formal education. That's, I think, like every city or every place does. So this is our strategy in Hamburg. It's more about education for sustainable development, including climate change, not especially focusing on climate change. So I'm going to try to stop it. I promise you, Raul, I do it in 4 minutes 30. And I did.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing this very practical approach to the Hamburg ESD Master Plan 2030, which I need to say that it has been shared with other cities of the network and had been a very important role model to follow. So thank you for that, and thank you for also sharing these elements of mitigation and adaptation, but also not focusing on specific topics involving education. The intersectorality of the master plan, I think, is quite interesting. Thank you, Ralph, really for your sharing this knowledge and the work that Hamburg is doing on this particular topic. I would like then to move to our second respondent, and it's Ms. Joy Voiset. Ms. Joy is coordinator of the UCAN Ad hoc Steering Group, Africa Upcycle Community. She's an environmentalist working to improve responses to climate change issues through an intersection and technology and community development projects with children young people and educators, equipping them with upcycling waste towards skills and climate education. So, Ms. Joy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rao. Thank you very much to the organizers. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And yes, thank you very much, Mr. Ralph. Okay, so basically, we want to talk about the importance of lifelong learning for climate action from the youth perspective. Young people generally make up of about 16% of the world's population, which is about 1.3 billion. And I believe through learning for climate action, they recognize their ability to lead and to lead others, which is what we do at Africa Upcycle Community, where I currently serve as the founder. We expose children to upcycling skills, children who do not have access to climate change education in those climate risk communities to climate change issues, making them understand the importance of changing actions. And just recently, one of the children, which we have trained and educated on climate change learning for climate action, organized her own event at age 8. She's just 8 years old. And she organized an event embodying about 15 children to teach them about climate change and climate action. So this is one of the importances of learning for climate action. Climate action is really not about the climate. It's about the minds of people. Their actions impacts the climate. If people do not think it is necessary, they will keep harming the planet. Their actions, their words, their speeches, their day-to-day activities, they will keep harming the planet. So they have to know that, yes, it is necessary that I change my actions towards the planet and towards the climate, and learning has a great impact on spurring action to the climate. Now, the refusal to share power with young people in adult-led administrations, and the belief that young people are not capable at young ages, is a major challenge, and it has to be debunked through immediate climate action learning. As at today, I know in about 20 countries in Africa, there is no climate action learning. There's no climate change education as we speak. And the last conference I was invited to in the Education for Sustainable Development as a speaker as well, it's all these challenges that were highlighted, and we're talking about importance of climate action. Climate change is happening currently, it is killing people. And, you know, just think about what impact it will make when young people are being involved in learning for the climate at really, really young ages. You know, in these climate risk communities and in different countries around the world. Now, another thing again is that young people in different parts of the world have been identified as a vital tool to tackling climate change and inherent societal challenges, but they are absent in the climate change policy making. And I believe that the learning for climate action, from my perspective, would spur this, you know, they would begin to demand for young people being included in climate policy inclusion. They would begin to demand for the right things to be done in terms of carbon emissions reductions, in terms of, you know, securing their future, in terms of, you know, changing policies and, you know, cutting down on carbon emissions in their country, because it is not really about the current generation, but about the next generation, because they are the ones that are much impacted by these challenges. And another thing again is that young people, in line with lifelong learning, I believe the objective would be to provide young people with the appropriate learning skills to better understand the challenges of climate change and understand the importance of assuring the sustainable development. And, you know, to help young people, when young people understand what climate change is and why they should take climate action, it will help them to better respond to critical climate and societal challenges, which is exactly what we do as well in the UNESCO Youth Climate Action Network. And thankfully, these conversations have begun to happen. Another important aspect of learning for climate action from the youth perspective is climate change education definitely brings about a change of youth perspectives in how we think, how we act, how we discharge our responsibilities towards the planet. You know, rather than people asking how to solve climate change challenges, they're asking how to harness this opportunity to stay relevant with their goals, with their aspirations, you know, with less carbon footprints. For instance, a young person who has a business, who's running a business, or maybe a fabric in the textile industry, and they want to think about, okay, how do I cut down my production, my carbon emissions in the production processes? How do I cut down my use of water? How do I cut down my use of electricity? You know, because they understand the impact of these. Now, for instance, myself, as a young person, I know, because I'm a climate advocate, that I need to cut down on my carbon emissions every single day. Now, I would never know that if I wasn't informed or educated on climate change. And, you know, young people, like I said, they make up of about 25% of the world's population at the moment. So you can imagine how much impact it would make on learning for climate action, you know, on the longer term. So this is exactly what we look at our organization in the Africa Upcycle community, and begin to teach these children from the grassroots level for them to understand the importance of becoming environmental enthusiasts and the importance of taking action now to be able to prevent these challenges in the future. Also, young people are the future. You know, they're societal actors, and just by not doing anything, just by doing anything, or just by not doing anything, their actions and inactions at the same time impact the society at large. So it is very important that, irrespective of age, regional policies, gender, they should be able to have access to these important conversations and learnings around the world, because that way we can take action for the climate really faster, and you know, they will understand and have access to the learning skills of climate change, and, you know, push for it on the global level, and in the community level to be.
Ms. Joy, thank you very much. Thank you very much. We need to stop it because we would like to get some questions.
Okay.
So I very much appreciate your intervention. I think it really brought us to the intersection of really technology, community, the youth, for the impact what you were mentioning in the mind of people, and to provide also the right skills for what we are facing. I would like very fast to take some questions from the chat, and I would like to openly ask the panelists. There's a question from Mamadou Konate, and asking mainly how the programs of literacy for environmental can be supported financially. I think this is an important topic, because of course we are always facing challenges in terms of how to make them accessible to all, and to really being supported with the proper resources. So I don't know if some of the respondents or Mr. Carlos, as an introductory keynote, would like to respond to this particular question.
Sorry, I'm not a specialist on that, so maybe somebody from your institute might be in a better position, more knowledgeable about the sources of funding, right?
Maybe I can just make a comment on that question then. I think this question underlines the need to bring lifelong learning into those strategies for lowering carbon emissions that countries are now developing. If we have it integrated into the policies, then it makes it easier as a lever to also raise budgets for it, to have dedicated financial sources to promote learning for the environment, for environmental protection, for climate action. So I think this is a quite important step to formalize learning for the environment by integrating it into policies and strategies at national but also at local level, and this will certainly make it easier to raise funds for lifelong learning for sustainable development.
Thank you very much, Edith. I think this really goes into the point of the question. I would like to ask you another one, and it's so obviously open to all of you. And we heard that not just right now, but in the previous also panel, lifelong learning has a critical role to play in supporting climate action and to create the conditions in which meaningful, positive change can occur. So in a very practical way, how can lifelong learning improve climate action? Yes, please, Mr. Alvarez.
Yeah, I want to profit from the occasion also to weave with the two questions asked by Raquel de Oliveira. And to say that when we talk about lifelong learning, when we talk about learning, I think we have to make a shift from the usual or conventional approach that learning is a consequence of teaching processes, you know, because the challenge we are facing, it's a civilizational challenge. It's not just a technical issue that, oh, now we realize that the sources of energy we have been using have created a huge problem called climate change. It is, of course, that, but that's just a symptom of a deeper civilizational challenge. And to address that, we don't have the responses yet. And so this cannot be taught, you know, as, oh, don't worry, these are the recipes. I loved what Ralph Behrens said about the usual approach is technical, you know, and we forget about education. And sorry, the technical solutions are only part of the response, but they are not even the most important part, because the most important part is changing our mindset. And how do we change that? And it's a completely different approach. It's not the development of the technical solution to change the mindset, you know, it's about cultural change, and it has to be addressed in a different way. And I see an issue in how many of these questions are framed as if people were the problem. You know, many times, explicitly or not, we are thinking that people are the problem because they don't understand, because they are not educated well enough, because they vote for Trump, because whatever, or because there are too many, you know. And we have to get out of that framing and beware of falling into that framing to say, no, people are the solution. People are the response. So the learning, in my view, only will happen when we will truly bet on the humanity and capacities of everybody and make people really the actors of the transformation. Not the recipients of something, some knowledge that a few persons have, because this is not the case. This is not the case. So it's fundamentally a shift to learning, not as a consequence of teaching, but as a consequence of mobilizing the capacity of everybody to learn, and that requires different ways of engage into learning processes, which, by the way, are very consistent with this idea of lifelong learning, in my view.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alvarez. I think this co-creation of the process is very very important to think that together we can make it, but just together, you know. We are on time. I just would like to give 30 seconds to each of you if you want to make a closing. I will start with Ralph.
Yeah, thank you. One point we haven't mentioned yet is in Germany we call it's kind of climate change depression. So especially the young people, they are afraid of the climate change, and we call it kind of, they're depressed because of the challenges of climate change. They're afraid of their future, and we run 2 courses already with young people just to tackle this fear they have about their future. This is a problem we didn't discuss yet, but I think this is a point, and this is a problem, especially here in Germany or in Hamburg.
Thank you very much for the point, for the other provocation. I think it's quite well taken. Ms. Joy.
Thank you very much. My final intervention would be, the climate is changing, people are dying, and really it's not about the climate, it's about the minds of people. And are you changing as the climate is changing? So I want us, every single one of us here, to think about what would happen in the next 100 years, what would happen, how would life be like in the next 50 years for young people and for the next generation. And this should impact your daily activities and your daily actions towards the planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks to you. And last, Edith.
Thank you. Yes, very briefly, maybe on the point of raising awareness for climate change. I think that's will be very crucial within all countries. Also to, as Ralph has mentioned, that the first thing a lot of cities and countries talk about with climate change is are technical solutions. So we need to raise awareness that these technical solutions will also be accepted by the population, even though they may be more inconvenient in their daily lives. So I think apart from skills development, raising awareness will be quite crucial to drive the change. Thank you so much.
Thank you to all. I really want to thank to all speakers and participants for this valuable panel. I think it brought very important discussions and a lot of elements to continue our discussion. I wanted to congratulate the panelists and also to invite due to our next panel, number 4, that will be demographic changes, migration and aging, moderated by my colleague Nicolas Jonas. So Nicolas, I pass the baton to you. Thank you very much.
Oui, bonjour à tous. Merci beaucoup Raoul et merci.
Thank you very much everybody.
Session numéro 3 qui était très intéressante. Donc, pour cette session 4 qui va être dédiée aux évolutions démographiques, nous allons suivre exactement la même structure.
So the next session will be dedicated to demographic changes and migration and aging. We will present the work of UIL, and then we will hear the reactions of 2 specialists. My name is Nicolas Jonas. I am a team leader at UIL, and I have the pleasure of moderating this session. As you know, demographic changes represent an upheaval of the structure of the planet's population, but there are plenty of challenges at local, national and international level. So these demographic changes have an impact on lifelong learning because they represent a challenge and question the capacity of education systems to really take all this on board and to be flexible. But it has an impact on lifelong learning because it shows the relevance of lifelong learning in order to face this new demographic deal. So in order to respond to all these questions around the demographic future and its impact on lifelong learning, I have the honor to welcome among us Professor Ian Golding from the University of Oxford, who is a specialist when it comes to these questions and models around that and prospective analyses, who is going to introduce this fourth session. Mr. Golding, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Nicholas, and thank you very much to UNESCO Institute for Learning to invite me to participate in this 70th anniversary. It's a huge honor and privilege. The topic of demographic change, migration, and aging, and its relationship to lifelong learning could not be more important. It is a topic which will become bigger and bigger in significance. We are entering a period of unprecedented demographic change. And what is surprising to me and to many demographers is the pace of this demographic transformation. It's not only, as was at first imagined, a rich country issue, it's totally global. Well over half the countries in the world now have fertility rates which are below replacement level of around 2.1 children per adult woman, and many way below. I know we have colleagues from South Korea, which is the lowest in the world, but Thailand, for example, has a lower fertility rate than Sweden. And many countries are seeing a dramatic transformation within one generation. This is for good reasons. This is about women's rights to choose, the improvement in availability of contraception, improvement in awareness of the responsibilities of parenthood, and of course, it's about women's entry into the labor market as well as people's choices regarding their gender identity and what they want to do in life. So this reflects choice, but it also reflects deeply economic circumstances. The cost of living is going up dramatically, and that's accelerated. And of course, with the cost of living going up, the cost of a room for a child, the cost of education, of health, and everything else for children is going up very rapidly. And the benefits are not in terms of financial returns. When one's in a rural area, lots of children can look after you in your old age. They can look after you or help you look after the farm. But in urban living, particularly where people are dispersed in different cities and so on, the benefits have gone down in terms of the economics. So we are seeing this dramatic decline, and it's not going to be reversed. There are some stalling in life expectancy. The pandemic was one reason for that. Declining living standards, inequality, and crises have led to the stalling. And in the US, for example, life expectancy is now below what it was 5 years ago. This is true in some places. And what has become more and more apparent is the wide diversity. In my city, Oxford, which is a small city of only 200,000 people, there's a 15-year difference in life expectancy between different neighborhoods. And this diversity reflects inequality in every respect, in access to health, in education, and of course, in public health and lifestyles. So we should expect rapid aging, but we should expect rapid dispersion as well around the mean as this goes forward. I'm convinced that by the second half of the century, we will see a peak world population and a very rapid decline in aging. Median ages are likely to double over a 50-year period. We go from a median age in Africa of around 20 to 22 in some countries to median age of well over 40, rising to well over 50 in some of the most advanced and most rapidly aging countries. China has 4 million less workers this year than last year. And of course, it's not because of the one-child policy. Hong Kong, Taiwan have much lower fertility rates than mainland China, but no policy. So definitely rapid aging. Until that means we're going to be seeing very rapid rises in dependency ratios, in the tax burden, the unaffordability. I believe we will see an end of retirement as we know it over the coming 10, 20 years. It's already illegal in many countries, age-based retirement rules. I think this will become a much more global norm. It's simply unaffordable for young people to sustain old people in the workplace. And as working populations contract and productivity stagnates, as a greater share of our economies is care and education, we will see the pressure economically on people to carry on working. This has a hard barrier currently into the 80s because of neurodegeneration. When we get to the second half of the century, I believe Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and dementia will be cured. But for the time being, this is a hard barrier and a very high dependency. But what this means is that people need to be economically active and engaged well into their 60s and 70s and 80s. This doesn't mean necessarily work. It means stimulated. It means physically active. It means able to use new technologies. We move to a world of digital currencies. We move to a world of e-government. We move to a world where if you don't have the new abilities to understand, you are discriminated against. You are left out of society. You cannot be an active player in society unless you have constant learning. The idea that education that we learned 60 or 70 years ago is going to be fit for purpose is obviously a complete fantasy. And so lifelong learning becomes not simply an interesting thing to have, it becomes a must-have, a human right for people. You cannot be a fully functioning citizen unless you have a constant learning. You cannot engage what Amartya Sen calls be empowered. You cannot affect your environment and be an active contributor to your environment unless you have lifelong learning. How this takes place and whether we are able to meet the enormous challenge is absolutely key. Already we see large parts of our society disenfranchised in various ways by not being able to participate. We see this in multiple dimensions, not only technological, but also an understanding of people and of new norms and standards. My view is that we're living in a new renaissance of rapidly changing perspectives on many things, including, for example, gender. This requires a very different way of thinking about the world as it was in the Renaissance, different perspectives. And this too requires new ways of learning. The new learning creates extraordinary opportunities. I'm the chair of a charity called econ.org, which is devoted to new learning of economics, which has taken off, but it's on multiple dimensions. And of course, it needs to not just be a MOOC or a private thing, because what we understand from all the literature is that learning collectively is more effective, and that social networks, friendships, and informal tacit knowledge is as important as formal knowledge. Zoom is a very poor way to learn. It's very hierarchical. One person speaks at a time. There's no tacit signals of significance. And of course, the timing is set. So how we move beyond this is going to be a key question, and neighborhoods, communities, community centers, and clubs are vital in this respect, all of which have been very severely adversely affected during the pandemic around the world. The final topic I've been asked to address is regarding migration. The economics of migration stand in very strong contrast to the politics and ideologies around them. We are all migrants wherever we are in the world, if we look back far enough. And of course, migration is going to become more and more significant. There is no way that the rapidly aging societies are going to be able to meet their needs of the future without greater numbers of migrants in their societies. No amount of technological change is going to care for an elderly person. No amount of technological change, at least in my lifetime, no amount of technological change is going to care for a young person or be able to cook a good meal in a kitchen. So we need to accept that the rapid aging of societies will bring an increased need for migrants. If we don't increase migration, we will have very rapidly rising costs and very rapid deterioration in services and capacity. This stands in very sharp contrast to the politics. There's an enormous need of people to migrate. There's 100 million young people coming onto the labor market in Africa over the next 10 years alone. The ability for these people to find meaningful livelihoods in Africa is extremely constrained. You would think that if logic prevailed, there would be a match between excess supply of labor in one place and excess demand in another. That's how economists might think about the world. It's not how politicians think about the world. And this disconnect is one that is going to be a source of growing tensions, I believe. This is before one takes into account the refugee question. Refugees are people that have a legitimate concern regarding their lives, and either because they're in danger or they've been forced from where they are by climatic war or other events. How this transforms is going to be important. I think the German experiment is that they have benefited enormously from the absorption in society of over 1 million migrants. And of course, the European Union more broadly, particularly within the Schengen area, is an incredible experiment of how migration works across national borders. But of course, the outer frontiers of the European Union are higher and higher walls. We'll see this in the US, we'll see it in all places. And of course, it's a conversation that's going to have to be embarked upon much more deeply in the countries with the most rapid aging, notably Japan, Korea, and others, where this is still in its infancy in terms of mobility. Migrants don't only bring labor, of course, they bring skills and knowledge. All the greatest innovations environments are ones which are very, very migrant infused. This was true in the Renaissance in Florence. It's true today in Silicon Valley. It's true in all the great cities of the world. And there's also a very interesting correlation between the share of migrants and happiness. We see that societies which are consistently voted, the cities which are consistently voted as the best places to be, are the ones with the highest shares of migration, like Toronto, Vancouver, San Francisco, London, Paris, etc., within their societies. So this will be, I believe, a big struggle of the coming. And of course, for migrants, there's a key learning question, which is how migrants learn language, skills, norms, and others, which is also about lifelong learning. Many migrants are not of school or university age. They do not attend that in their host countries. And so how one uses lifelong learning to make the migrants more effective, more happy, and more able to adopt the norms and customs, but also retain their old and retain contacts with the countries they come from, will become absolutely crucial. Chair, I've said a lot. I hope I've stimulated the conversation and look forward to it.
Merci infiniment, professeur Goldin, pour votre brillant exposé qui présente de façon très convaincante à quel point les défis futurs sont très étroitement liés aux questions démographiques que nous connaissons actuellement, et à quel point également l'apprentissage tout au long de la vie peut être un angle clé en fait pour adresser plusieurs de ces défis posés par les questions démographiques. Alors évidemment, ces défis démographiques sont une réalité que les travaux de l'UIL doivent prendre en compte et prennent en compte. Et j'ai le plaisir maintenant de donner la parole à ma collègue Angela Owusu-Boapong qui va vous présenter les travaux de l'UIL en lien avec ces questions démographiques. Angela, la parole est à toi.
Schon wieder nicht drauf gedrückt. Oh, scheiße.
Thank you very much. I hope you can see my presentation.
Yes.
Perfect. So thank you very much to all these introduction, which perfectly provides a basis for my short presentation about UIL's ongoing work and UIL's future work in the area of demographic change, migration, and aging. My name is Angela Owusu-Boapong. I'm program specialist at UIL, and I will focus in my presentation mainly on what UIL does to assist member states to better respond to the demographic changes that have just been outlined by Professor Goldin and my colleague Nicola. And mainly the phenomena of demographic change and mobility, including migration, is affecting population size and structure in almost every part of the world. However, to a varying degree, as was just outlined. For us, this means immediate action, forward-looking strategies, and above all, concerted global efforts across and among countries and regions, as it was outlined in the Marrakesh Framework for Action. So what does demographic change mean with regard to lifelong learning? It means that, as mentioned already, the lifespan of people is increasing. It is rapidly a rapid aging society on the one hand. But what I would also like to point out is the fact that we also have to recognize and understand that there is an opposite development in some other regions of the world, meaning, for instance, in sub-Saharan Africa, where we have 25% of the school-age population being located in that region by 2030, as it was mentioned in the UNESCO Operational Strategy for Africa 2022 until 2029. So we have a rapid aging population on the one hand, on the one side, but we also have a growing population of young people who are pushing to the labor market that we also have to understand and recognize. We speak about mobility, including migrants, refugees, internally displaced people. I have to say that at the end of 2020, the UNHCR reported 82.4 million forcibly displaced persons, of whom 26.4 million were refugees. Climate change and environmental degradation will further increase this number, especially in coastal areas. So what does this mean when we speak about mobile populations, aging societies, a growing number of young people? It means that the discontinuation of life course is a problematic aspect. The disrupted transition is also a problematic aspect that has to be captured by the education system. It means that migration increases also the burden on education systems. And overall, we have to understand that educational offers, learning opportunities, must be flexible, they must be needs-based, and must be reprioritizing to address the effects of aging societies, increasingly mobile populations, which ask to respond to the diversity of cultural identities in countries that require aspects and support to social integration. With regard to the current situation, GRAIL 5, the Global Report on Adult Learning Education, which was launched at the 7th International Conference on Adult Education in Marrakesh in June this year, which covers data from 159 member states from 2018 and 2019, shows that there is a decrease in participation in adult learning education from older adults, an increase for youth, and no change in participation for migrants. I think it is important to highlight that the previous edition of GRAIL, GRAIL 4, mentioned that 37% of the countries reporting did not know the participation rates of ethnic minorities, migrants, and migrants. And 28% in grade 4 mentioned that they did not know whether migrants and refugees, internally displaced people, were a priority for government financing of ALE. So with a view to what are the UIL achievements in the area of aging societies, with a view to UIL's work, it has to be mentioned that there is a major focus on research. This major focus on research is characterized by a comprehensive project that covers several components, which includes a literature review. It includes an international survey of universities, and also case studies to capture the trends and innovative practices with regard to aging societies. And all that forms a basis to inform UIL's capacity development in order to support member states to more effectively and better address the needs of aging societies in policy and practice. In future, UIL expects to work in the area of aging societies by addressing particularly the 3 main key aspects that have already been outlined just before. It will be that we consider a longer lifespan of aging populations, and we also have to consider the aspect that there will not be the idea of retirement, but a continuous work of older population. This means that we will focus on ICTs, we will focus on labor markets integration with skills, upskilling and reskilling. And also what is a key aspect within UIL's work is to focus on intergenerational learning that comprises learning of the whole family. And yesterday we heard about the Grandmothers Project, which had a very interesting impact. As just mentioned, we talk about older populations, aging societies, rapid aging on the one hand, but we also talk about in other regions the aspect of a growing young population. And this young population will be also part of UIL's focus. It has been part of UIL's focus so far. The achievements mainly focus on strengthening non-formal education policy and practice in countries, in particular for young women. It will always be a core of UIL's work to promote quality learning provision, which is flexible, and as I mentioned, needs-based and relevant to the needs of the youth in order to facilitate and promote their individual learning pathways. Learner-centeredness is key. The learner is key. Assisting countries to bring to bridge formal and non-formal education will also be one of the key aspects within, is also one of the key aspects of UIL's work. Within RAMA, we assist member states to increase the capacity for measuring the outcomes of literacy programs. And we also, in the provision, provide tools that include intergenerational learning for educators, parents, and researchers. The future directions within youth will comprise further work on RVA, recognizing the prior learning achievements of young people. RAMA will include a RAMA Ed that covers also the age range 9 to 14. And within the provision of UIL's Learning Hub, we will definitely increase on including more other stakeholders, providing access to other stakeholders interested in accessing the Learning Hub. We will diversify the thematic offer, and we will also make sure that the Learning Hub will be available in different languages so far. When it comes to the aspect of our work, we will definitely also have to focus on the key aspects on RVA, ICTs, and OER. And that means that OER is understood as providing a commons-based approach providing open access to knowledge and learning resources as a key to ensuring inclusion and equity in access and participation. We will definitely in our work also work on enabling an exchange not only at national level, but also recognizing the needs at local level. We will work together with UNHCR in capacity development for policymakers and internally displaced people, and we will also identify further learning components for our learning hub. One of our major focus will be on post-conflict affected countries. And this means that in post-conflict affected countries, we will make further research and we will also provide capacity development, particularly in the aspects of numeracy and literacy in connection with technology. And all that work and efforts should respond to the current and future challenges of our times. And we will continue to mobilize and to promote the work in this area so that the notion of education as a global common good can be upheld as it was outlined in the Marrakesh Framework for Action, which we are now collaboratively with regions and countries implementing. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Angela. Thanks a lot for your summary and overview of some of the key activities undertaken at UIL regarding this topic of demographic evolution. I would like now to give the floor to Dr. Dae Yong-kan, President of the National Institute for Lifelong Education from the Republic of Korea, to react to this presentation and give some of his own activities and priority. Please, Mr. Kang, the floor is yours.
Hi, good afternoon. Actually, good evening from South Korea. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this symposium today. First of all, congratulations on UIL's 70th anniversary. The National Institute for Lifelong Education, NIL, was established in 2008. So we only have a 14 years history, but NIL, the UIL has 70 years. So only 1/5 of the history we share with UIL. But I think for the past 14 years, we tried to build a special relations between UIL and NIL, including in 2009, we hosted the 6th Confintia preparatory meeting in Seoul. And in 2017, we hosted a Confintia midterm review meeting in South Korea. Other than that, we have built and cooperate numerous areas of the policy that UIL has interested on. So I hope our partnership will expand further in the coming years. I think one of the essential areas of exchange and collaboration between UIL and NIL is a lifelong learning policies related to the demographic structural change and aging societies. So as Professor Goldin mentioned, Korea is one of the fastest aging countries in the world. And due to the very low fertility rate, demographic structural changes significantly impact our economy and society. From 2020, the total population of Korea started to decrease. Education for adults and the elderly are more important than ever. In Korea, we began the National Survey of Lifelong Learning Participation in 2007. The survey originally conducted on the population aged from 25 to 64. But the scope of the survey has expanded to 79 years old since 2017. It reflects the aging population and aging society in Korea. The overall participation rate dropped significantly due to the COVID pandemic last year. The overall participation exceeded 40% for 3 consecutive years from 2018, but it fell to 30.7% in 2021. So the participation rate for those aged 65 to 79 is 19.2%. But the participation rate for those aged 25 to 34 is 40.6%. There is about double difference. So we have a task to increase the overall participation rate while we have to focus on the older adult specifically. The National Institute for Lifelong Education has implemented several initiatives to increase participation in lifelong learning. Particularly, we try to focus on the expanding college education opportunities for the adult. As a policy called the Lifelong Learning in Universities for Future of Education, we provide financial support worth 25 billion Korean won. That's about $17 million at today's exchange rate to 30 universities. So with this support, we provide college education opportunities to about 4,000 adult and old people. Angela just presented that RVA. In South Korea, we prefer the term RPL as a measure for immigration. NIL is preparing to introduce the RPL policy for adult university students next year. In addition, the RPL policy is being operated to recognize adult secondary education in Korea too. So we would like to look forward to the collaborating with the UIL to expand the RPL in South Korea to increase the lifelong learning participation. Let me just briefly add the refugee issue in South Korea. Last year, we accepted the Afghan refugees into Korea. NIL provides the Korean language materials for children and adolescents and the materials necessary to successfully settle in Korean schools. However, in South Korea, there is still considerable public opinion against accepting refugees. So according to the recent poll by Korea Research, 48% were in favor and 34% were against it. However, in their 20s, 25% were in favor, whereas the 47% against it. So there's a need for the educational effort to improve young people's understanding of the refugees and the refugee acceptance in South Korea. I hope NIL contributed to enhancing the young generation's opinion on refugee issues. So we need some help from UILs regarding this matter. Well, congratulations once again on the 70th anniversary of UIL. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for your presentation, and we are very honored at UIL for this strong collaboration between NIL and UIL on those very common questions and common challenges that we are trying to address together. So now to conclude this panel, I'm very pleased to give the floor to Mr. Craig Dean from the Norwegian Council of Refugees to react as well and to present some of its own project. Craig, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, and it's wonderful to be here today. Congratulations to UIL on this great achievement, and to the previous speakers also. I very much like Professor Ian Golding's "We are all migrants" statement. So, and perhaps just to reflect on the importance of lifelong learning for refugees, I'll quote Ayat, a 16-year-old young woman refugee from Syria, who is part of a video produced with UIL and NRC from NRC's Youth Education and Training Program in Jordan, where she lives in one of the refugee camps there. So she says she advises every girl to get educated, as it makes everything easier for you. And as a girl, I know what I want. You can work hard for 1 year, but get profits for a lifetime. And I think what this captures is obviously that investment in her own life and in the future, and her encouragement for everyone to learn, but also what she can contribute to her family and community, especially as young people take on more responsibility during displacement for the community and their family. So at the Norwegian Refugee Council, our youth education and training program has been working with and for displacement affected young people for 20 years. And in the last 10 years alone, we've supported over 200,000 young people in 23 conflict affected countries. And our learning is actually how the importance of lifelong learning is a foundation to improve the well-being of those young people as they transition into adulthood. Our research into the well-being of displacement affected young people is showing how lifelong learning supports young people to be active and engaged members of their communities, and how they can transition into education pathways or livelihood opportunities of their choice. And we see how this holistic view of the needs and capacities of youth well-being and displacement really benefits themselves, their communities, and their families as a whole. So to go back to Ayat, she is one of the 750,000 refugees living in Jordan. And we know that 76% of Syrian refugees in Jordan are under 35. So this is both gives us the scale of the challenge, but also represents a huge potential of these young people who have overcome extreme hardship. But we know that they are so determined to contribute to their communities and to participate in decision making. And this is ultimately linking to their learning throughout that process. Our programs in that context have provided structured and certified learning opportunities linked to numeracy and literacy, vocational skills, as well as life skills and digital skills, which I think the professor mentioned just how essential those digital skills are and will be to access any legal status, any service, connecting and telephoning family and living in different parts of the world or transferring money. Those digital skills are really essential. And NSE has collaborated with the private sector, with government, local authorities to provide blended online and offline solutions to this training approach. This includes the provision of digital content, as well as remote learning with some of our partners, such as the Arizona State University, who provide certified English courses, amongst other courses. But then the learning aspect is only the first step. We need them to be able to actually use those skills and contribute to their community. So we then work with them to establish paid internship opportunities, which again, the intergenerational aspect, the mentors from the community are essential parts of these internships, but then also supporting them to generate income, where we operate businesses within the camp with the young people, where other agencies can come and we can produce wooden beds for people with disabilities or repurposing desks for the Ministry of Education schools. And we know from evaluations that this approach has really contributed to the young people's economic, social, emotional, and educational well-being, again, coming back to the holistic approach. But Jordan is quite unique in many sense because it's, for the refugee context, it's stable, it's safe, it had a huge amount of resources provided, it was high profile for a long time, if not in the recent year. But it's also very restrictive for young people to work. There's no right to work, and there's not a large youth civil society in those countries. So we also want to bear in mind a little bit how this approach differs in places like the Central African Republic or in South Sudan, where the situation is much more unstable for young people. They do have the right to work, but have limited economic opportunities, and the crises are protracted. And we've seen how useful providing funds to youth civil society to lead youth-led action, support that lifelong learning approach through the delivery of community projects, but also delivering education and learning opportunities for those young people and the importance of that collaboration with the private sector through market-based approaches and youth-led advocacy and policy work. So this is why I'm really very happy to see this investment from UIL in the area of youth and refugees. There are 100 million people forcibly displaced from their homes at the moment, and around 50% of these are young people. We're seeing 57% are accessing secondary education and 6% tertiary education. This is again a massive loss of potential, so we very much welcome the UIL's increased focus in this area. Funding is a massive challenge. Education is only 3% of humanitarian funding, and there's an estimated $39 billion a year needed for children and youth to access education in conflict-affected countries. So again, we very much welcome this. And our solutions with young people are reliant on bringing together multiple stakeholders. So the focus on policy, on capacity building and access to services for these young people in the UIL's plans is very, very relevant, and we hope to be able to collaborate further. One final kind of message from my side through this approach is not to underestimate the value of providing funding directly to young people for their solutions and their organizations. Again, this allows them to develop the skills and learn through the process of managing these funds and mobilizing partners and collaborating on what skills they need and how they're going to access them through digital solutions, all aligned to the focus of UIL. But putting the money in the hands of young people themselves is hugely powerful. We see people like the Syrian Youth Assembly. This is a volunteer network that have mobilized 10 online partners providing certified language courses, entrepreneurship courses, peace building courses, and they've supported over 120,000 Syrian youth and are now expanding their mandate to all displacement affected youth. People like the Global Refugee Youth Network are providing a global youth-led funding mechanism for youth-led action. And we're working with them in Ukraine for Ukrainian refugees at the moment. And again, their solutions are not just focused on young people, they're focused on the community as a whole, including those older generations. They're having livelihood opportunities, community actions. So this builds trust, recognition, again, all of the goals around access and improved policies by putting young people in the driving seat. So thanks again for this opportunity, and yeah, I very much hope we can continue our collaboration.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot, Craig, for this very concrete examples that remind us how it can be difficult to make lifelong learning happening in the ground, and what are the steps that we have to take into account for those very difficult challenges. So we are running a bit behind the clock, but nevertheless we will take just 5 minutes before ending the panel, and I will kindly ask Professor Goldin if he would accept to in 2 minutes maybe to make some concluding remarks made on the based on the questions that we received on the Q&A box. And so please, Professor, the floor is yours. Your mic is muted. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the comments and the many questions that have been asked. I'm on Twitter, and so if I don't get time to respond to everything here, we can continue through direct messaging on that. The first question is about examples of collective learning. I would say these are the sorts of learning things that have been done in clubs, in adult education classes, in informal networks, but across the board, everything from physical activities to history to engaging, but it's the coffees and teas after them which are as important. as are the formal learning processes, and of course the mentoring and relationships that come with that. The Renaissance is a period of intense change, and it's one where you have to accelerate the learning capacity. And of course, one of the big challenges is, are the teachers, are the people engaged, have the right skills? And one of the things that's always struck me is the very mixed ability of people. So how one begins to think about that and bring a lot more young people, a lot more people with up-to-date knowledge into it, I think will be crucial. The question on taxonomies, yes, they are, taxonomies hold one in the past in many respects, but I think one needs to engage with them, because that's what we hear around, and that's what people hear the jargon of, and unless they understand the taxonomies, they cannot begin to reform them and work beyond them. This question on brain drain is a very, very interesting one. My own view is it is a real issue, but the countries that have been most successful at being a source of skilled migrants are often also the most successful at developing their own education systems. Obviously, Philippines stands out on care and teaching, where we see it has a higher level domestically of capacity because it is the biggest exporter in the world as well. And it's circular. It's not simply that people go, they come back, but also they overinvest domestically for that. Remittances are obviously a very important thing. And my own view is that the brain drain should also be compensated. It's an absolute scandal that the amount of human capital that, for example, leaves Africa, if you value it in terms of the cost of education, is probably greater than all aid going into Africa. A country like Malawi or South Africa, many others, training nurses, teachers, and others that taxpayers have paid for, that then leave to the benefit of societies in much wealthier economies. So how we think about this and compensate the governments or the individuals, if that's the case, is a vital part of it. And I think that's all the questions that were posed to me.
Thanks a lot, Professor Goldin, for your concluding replies. So we have to close now the session. Our interpreters need a well-deserved break before we could go further in the conference. I would like to thank again Professor Kang and Craig Dean for your participation, and we very look forward further discussions between our institutions to work closely together on this question of demographic changes and lifelong learning. So we'll be happy to speak to you later. And for all of the participants, we will now stop this panel 4, and we will come back for the panel 5 at 2 p.m. Hamburg or Paris time, depending where you are. And we will, for people who posted the questions on Q&A, we will do our best to reply by writing, of course. So have a nice break, and thanks again to all of our panelists for their participation.